one more.
One more.
How long is Maryland going to work?
I think 3 more years.
Conde,
Yeah, that's it. I conned it. I told her it was destined. Can't avoid it. Just have to accept your fate.
Well, you did well.
Well, I think we both did.
We did do that.
Let's not be Mr. Hall over there.
53 years.
53.
Oh, it's a long time.
Yeah. I've been there 39.
I said, well,
the average is 8 years, I think. That's when the itch comes. Remember that movie they had? The 7-year itch?
Yeah.
Right. When that happened, maybe the neighborhood changed on them or something. Jim, I think we're going to have to crack the whip on these fellow members. I think so.
Cindy's coming back.
Well, she's off.
Yes, no, she's been off. She's coming back.
Oh, what's that name? 4.
Yes, Cindy. A lot of traffic in the city.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Good to see you again.
Hi. Nice to see you. A little cold. You're nice and warm. Sarah Lynn went to nursing school or something? What did she do? Sarah Lynn. She left.
But she was going to nursing school, yes.
Huh?
And this is Carol Williamson.
Hi.
This is Cindy Noah.
Nice to meet you. Hi.
Hi.
Okay.
Carol is the town administrator.
We're in the big room now.
That's right. We're in the big room. Graduated. I may go ahead and just call the meeting to order. Yeah. I have it is 5:35, and I will go ahead and call the meeting to order for the Board of Architecture Review, January the 18th, 2022. If we have a roll call, please, of those that here, please, and I also will declare that we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Jim. Jim McLean?
Here.
Keith Bailey?
Here.
Paul Viscotti? Sandra York?
Here.
Dr. Gail Costin? John Miles? And Cindy Nord.
Okay, thank you very much. And we do have a quorum. I assume that the meeting notification has been posted according to state law?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. All right, the agenda is also in front of you. If you would take a look at it and make a motion to amend or approve. Motion made to approve the agenda. Is there a second? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Ayes have it. And if we would stand, I think the American flag is behind us, and Mr. Bailey would lead us in our pledge to the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, you also, you have the minutes for the November 18th call meeting in your packet, if you would review those and also move to approve or amend.
Make a motion to accept as published.
All right, there's a motion to accept as published. Is there a second? If there's a second, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Okay, now we move into the nitty-gritty of the meeting. As required, our guidelines and ordinances, we are required to elect officers each year. And with that, I will open up the nominations for chairperson for 2022. Got to have a chairman.
I'd like to offer up Jim McLean.
I've been chairman for a few years. I am willing to do it for one more year. This will be my last year as chair. I'm willing to accept it, but are there any other nominations? Okay, the nomination is seconded. Any other nominations for chair? Those in favor of Jim McLean for chairperson for 2022, say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Now we have the election of the vice chair for 2022. Mr. Bailey has served obviously as mayor and also as a vice chair of this group, and I would like to nominate Mayor Keith Bailey, former Mayor Keith Bailey. Pardon me.
I'll second that.
Okay, this nomination for Mr. Bailey. And is there any other nomination for vice chair? Those in favor of Mr. Bailey say aye.
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 Ayes have it. Now we have the appointment, I guess, for the secretary of the board. Mr. Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This year I asked Kirk Wilson, who is our permit and zoning technician in the office, to serve as secretary. So if the board is willing, I would recommend appointment of Kirk Wilson as secretary.
Just for my benefit, does that require approval by us?
It requires some action. Yes,
Action, yeah.
make a motion to appoint, I think.
So, okay. We have for us then for appointment for the secretary of the BAR, Mr. Kurt Wilson. Is there a nomination for Mr. Wilson? Would you like to nominate him?
I second that.
All right. Those in favor of Mr. Wilson say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Okay, on the action items, we have the meeting schedule for 2022 in front of you, if you would view that. And also we'll need a motion to approve the meeting schedule.
I'll make a motion to approve the schedule.
Okay. Is there a
I second it.
Okay. Those in favor of the meeting schedule for 2022 say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Okay, we also have before us an amendment for the rules and procedure for remote attendance, and if you would, I'm going to ask Mr. Williamson if he would walk us through this as to what it's about and give us his thoughts on it, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you see in your ordinance, in your packet, I believe it's, let's see, right after the calendar, this is section 30.12, which is a town ordinance that is applicable to town council to allow remote attendance. And I think when this was adopted in 2020, that the intent was for it to apply to the boards and commissions, but it was never explicitly spelled out, and I thought it needs something in the bylaws to reference this. So that's why I recommended this amendment to the bylaws, and you'll see I included the bylaws there, and I believe it's Article 2, Section 1, and remote meeting attendance. It says the Board of Architectural Review members may meet remotely in accordance with the requirements of Town Ordinance Section 30.12, which regulates remote meeting attendance for town council members. So essentially, the board would follow the guidelines that town council uses. So I did want to highlight a few things so that if you haven't had an opportunity to read that ordinance, and I've spoken with the attorney who drafted this, and he particularly stressed that this is discouraged as a option for board members or council members to attend remotely. It shouldn't be the norm, and but it does allow the members to participate and vote, but it's not considered present for the purposes of determining a quorum. So you can attend remotely, but it wouldn't go towards attending a quorum, and that's just how it is written now. I understand. I'm just going to explain to you how it is written, and you need anyone who wants to attend remotely needs to notify the town 24 hours in advance and state the reason for attending remotely. For the chairman or vice chairman, whoever is going to be presiding over the meeting, they need to be physically present. You can't do that remotely. And finally, also just want to mention that the council has hired a new town attorney. Her name is Jenny DuPont, and I've asked her to look at this ordinance, and she has some questions about it. And so just know that there may be some changes if she recommends amendments to the ordinance. So I just wanted that the board would be subject to whatever her changes are to Section 30.12. So basically, I just wanted to solidify that the Board of Architectural Review can meet remotely if necessary in accordance with how town council is able to meet remotely. So that's just the essence of it.
Does this come out? Has this come out of COVID? Is this kind of a?
It came out of COVID. I think that I wasn't here when this ordinance was drafted, but I think it was a way to not have to go to emergency ordinance each time. However, I do think that if it became fully remote, that there would have to be an emergency ordinance because of things like to preside over the meeting and you can't attend remotely. So if it did go out, to where we're everyone's operating remotely, then this would not apply. It would have to have an additional ordinance to allow for that. But
assuming though that there's going to be an end to COVID and what we're facing, is this likely to continue after that date, after that time frame?
Well, this is in the ordinance. This is not an emergency ordinance. This is in there. So this is I'll kind of look at it as a flexible way of allowing remote attendance, but it's not the whole, it's not completely like it would be if it were full-on isolation like we had in 2020. So just basically a little bit of flexibility built into the existing ordinance.
Pretty difficult, I think, in a lot of respects, for the BAR because of having to make some judgments, aesthetics judgments. You have to be able to see,
absolutely,
some case, touch and feel and understand as to how you would accomplish that remotely.
Correct.
But I understand, the intent and the reasons for it, as well. Right. But it's kind of hard to judge, appearances, based on remote, condition. So do we need to take any action on this at all, or is this just strictly for informational purposes.
Yes, the board needs to make an amendment. If the board is in favor of this, I mean, like you said, they're making arguments against it, but if the board is in favor of it, it needs to make a motion to amend the bylaw, the rules of procedure, that would, with the revision shown, and then, I mean.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
A remote attendance can vote, but is not considered available for a quorum. Is that correct?
That's correct in terms of the way it is written now. Like I said when I was saying that the new town attorney has some concerns about that, that's specifically her concern. Now, the prior attorney who wrote it has reiterated that to me, that was his intent. So I have not gotten the legal opinion, but I understand the question on that. But so I just, rather than have different rules apply to the Board of Architecture Review, to stay in keeping with how council does it. So if council changes it, it's going to be changed across the board with a simple, revision to that ordinance.
That is what's critical.
Right.
That is the emphasis of this of the entire ordinance. It's the linchpin. Can you vote, and does it count?
Right.
So until that's clarified.
Well, it's stated clearly in the ordinance. It says can vote,
But not a quorum.
Yeah, I'm not sure why you
That's
could be
ambiguity.
allowed to vote on something, but you're not considered present
Right.
for a quorum. It seems a little off.
I understand. I mean, so if you want to, if the board would prefer to wait to get this more clarified before taking this action, I certainly understand. But I understand that ambiguity. I just wanted to kind of, because not so much Board of Architecture Review, but the other boards do have been attending remotely at times, and so, but again, it wasn't in their rules of procedure to do that. So I was just trying to, and they were following this ordinance, but
It just seems that if you can vote, but you're not considered a quorum, then you can't have the meeting if you don't have a quorum. So therefore, would the votes be invalid? Somebody could throw that up later and say, well, you didn't have a quorum, so I'm not accepting that vote.
Well, it can't go towards a quorum, so you could have 6 members here, and one of them was attending remotely. So you had a quorum, and according to this, the one who was attending remotely could
now vote.
But if you had 2 members here and 4 members,
you did not have a quorum. Basically, if you don't have 4 physical members or the majority of the total member physically here, then you don't have a quorum.
I think also, if the town council decides or accepts this or makes changes, why won't that just filter down to the boards? So each board has to vote on it as well?
Well, it's just an amendment to the rules of procedure. It's either amending this or amending the section 30.12 to allow it to apply to boards and commissions. I guess one way or the other.
So it's not really imperative that we take any action per se on this, if it's going to come down the pike as well.
Well, I mean, I guess this was my way of doing it, was to change the bylaws of the board, so to just keep it in keeping with that.
Our guidelines have to change, I guess, if we want to.
I mean, this was one way of doing it. Now, I could change. I mean,
if the council allows it, but if the council allows it, and that's what they're using. So what we're saying no, we're not going to do or not mirror what the council is doing. We're going to come up with
our rules of procedure are, I guess, are.
I mean, the language says.
I think they mirror the council, to tell you the truth.
Excuse me.
I think our ordinance mirror what the council does.
Well, the language is the Board of Architecture Review members may meet remotely in accordance with the requirements of town ordinance section 30.12. So the whole intent is
so they make
the board in compliance with how town council is operating.
Okay, so we're just going to accept it anyway. Okay.
I mean, there's always multiple ways to skin a cat on making a revision. So this was just my proposal to just keep it as uniform across the board. Okay. So, up to the
Any other questions, by the way, Ms. Norwood, any questions? This would all be by Zoom, I assume? Is that what do you
Yeah, it lists
Anything.
ways of attending remotely in the ordinance.
Can it be by phone?
Yeah, that's what it says in here.
Yeah.
Acceptable means of remote participation include telephone, internet, or satellite-enabled audio or video conferencing.
Okay. Any other questions of Mr. Williamson regarding the rules of procedure? Okay, is there a motion to accept the amended rules of procedure for amended attendance, by remote attendance, excuse me?
I make a motion to table.
The motion is made to the table. Is there a second?
Second. Yeah.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Okay, next item has to do with, discussion items has to do with lighting regulations. There was, I think, a great deal of discussion at the last council meeting regarding some recommendations that came from the BAR regarding digital lighting and so forth, the window lighting. And maybe, Mr. Williams, you might walk us through basically what council decisions were regarding the recommendation that came from us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at the November meeting, the Board Architecture Review discussed lighting and made a recommendation to staff to draft a text amendment that would address lighting or address window signs, and so that's what was came before the council was a text amendment that added, based on what the Board Architecture Review recommended, prohibiting LED lighting in window signs except for a certain period of time. So that was brought to council as a text amendment at first reading in December 15th, and they voted against that.
Also went through the Planning Commission.
That's correct. I'm sorry. Yeah, it went to the Planning Commission and was recommended for approval from the Planning Commission at the beginning of December, and then went to first reading and did not pass first reading from Town Council.
Again, this has to do with lighted window signage. We're not talking about the open and closed, but when you use the entire frame of the glass of the window or as lighted signs, how are we going to regulate? Are we going to regulate it? I guess is what it boils down to. And I guess there's a possibility that we can look at maybe a text amendment where that the BAR, I guess, has to approve all lighted window signage, with the exception of being open and closed. That's one possibility, and we need to hear from the board as to how you feel like we need to move forward in this regard. This is, we regulate all outside signage, and we don't really, I guess, have a lot to do with. We don't regulate, the non-lighted window signage. This is new in terms of the lighted aspects of window signage.
And I heard what you said, but it's easier to hear.
Sure. So, Bailey, you have any thoughts in this regard?
Didn't know it was an issue per se. I thought the ordinance was fairly clear. And didn't address, you're right, inside the framework. I think that, first of all, we need to have what you said, absolutely right. The Architectural Review Board should, in fact, be, should have ownership of that particular issue in terms of lights and things of that nature. I think that's important. Now, we don't want to look like Las Vegas for sure. We want to do this in some manner that's fair and equitable to everyone. So, yeah, I think you probably hit the nail on the head when you're saying that we ought to be the ones that kind of police that area and make recommendations.
Are there currently any recommendations for size and width and height for signs in the window?
There is a restriction on the size of the window cannot cover more than 50% of the window, and then it needs to leave a space between 4 and 7 feet. But you just know the window signs do not come to the town for permitting. So it requires, observation and someone calling and complaining or something.
Carol, can you give us some background on this? How does it became an issue, and how prevalent is this throughout the community?
I don't think it's very prevalent. We got complaints about one storefront that had LED lights, and so that's how this came about.
So you got one complaint?
There were more complaints. It was maybe 2, I would say 2, I think.
And they were saying it was too bright or too many colors?
Both. I think it was the colors and size or the brightness of it.
Who got time for this? I'm sorry. I'm just thinking. I didn't mean to say that in my outside voice. Okay. All right.
I think what you have, though, is all signage basically is regulated through the town. And then we have kind of a new concept where you do have LED lighting that can frame the entire window, whether or not, that's is something that I feel like it's going to need to be regulated or permitted. It seems to be a technology that's developing in unison along those lines, particularly the LEDs.
But to your question about how that came about, the Board of Architectural Review had it on the agenda. That's really how it came about.
So we started this. Oh, okay. I didn't know.
You're vice chair.
Yeah, I'm the vice chair. Well,
I guess the basic question is, do we feel like that we need to regulate lighted window signage with the exception of open and closed
I think we do.
items along those lines?
I think we should.
Doesn't mean we don't permit it.
Well,
I guess the question is, do we want to regulate it?
if we do, we must have standards, and then we have to. And then we have to come up with those types of requirements.
We're not saying that it's not permitted.
Right, but it's more than 50%. It's not permitted. We are saying that, right?
Correct.
Okay. So when it gets to 20, 25%, then let's look a certain way or conform to a certain regulation.
Are we regulating colors? Red, white, and blue?
That's next.
We regulate colors for a lot of things, but I don't know that we've ever regulated colors for lighting.
And then what do we do for Christmas? Then we have to make those types of allowances.
That was in the proposed text amendment was it didn't apply for temporary lighting between Thanksgiving and New Year's Day. So there was an attempt to recognize that. But in terms of would the board like for staff to come back with some draft language before it goes any further, just for the board to continue to have discussion and then bring it to the board as some proposed language before it goes anywhere else?
I think that'd be the preferred method. Now, the one other issue or concern is that how about the ones that are already in question? Do they grandfather in, or like we did with the signs and stuff like that?
That's the simplest way. If the town wanted to regulate existing signs, I think there's a tool for that with amortization, where you recognize that businesses were following and were put them up, purchase lighting, and there's a way of kind of saying, okay, they can have it for X number of months or years until they kind of gotten their money's worth out of it, essentially.
You do know we've been down this road before.
Right. So I understand it, but I mean, I'm just saying that there is a tool for that if necessary.
That hadn't worked in the past. That has not worked in the past. Let's make note of that.
Okay. I mean, certainly the simplest way is to say, moving forward, but I'm just saying.
I have another question. In the minutes from last time in November, it says the chairman has requested that the board discuss the regulation of this type of sign. Following discussion, the board made a recommendation to prohibit LED lighting for window signs in the town of Blythewood, except during the Christmas season. So, did this get reopened?
Well, based on that, then the text amendment to the ordinance was drafted and taken to the planning commission and recommended for approval to the town council. And then, so for first reading of town council, they had a vote and they voted against it. So that's why they came back to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Just the chairman asked to discuss it.
What? You lost me. So the council said, we don't care, we're not going to address this.
Right.
And then it somehow got back to the BZA?
The chairman asked to have a discussion on the agenda.
We recommended it because like it did be reported back to us as why, it was not accepted.
Oh, so that's what you're doing now?
Yes, so it's back on the agenda, and the chairman asked him.
I guess the question is, do we need to look at maybe another avenue as far as regulating?
Can I chime in? I think it would be hard to regulate. I'm just giving my 2 cents. Groucho's has a Groucho's mark sign up in the top right-hand corner of the restaurant. It's very inconspicuous. I don't think that businesses will necessarily ask us to put a lighted sign up. I think it'll just get put up, something like that as an example. And so it'll be up to someone either to complain about it or sending us out there going to each business looking for lighted signs.
But if we really think it's important, then we should send somebody out there.
Exactly.
I think it's important, but either we do or we don't.
What we're saying too, that it's not going to be permitted. What we're saying is going to be regulated by the BAR.
Yeah.
So it's just like we do any other colors on any other building, anything along those lines. So we're talking about lighted window signage that can be as simple as something very, very small to include the entire front.
Well, I guess I'm just saying, in my experience in the 8 years I've been here, no one's ever approached me about can I or can I not put a lighted sign up. So that's why I'm saying I think that we would have to catch them putting it up, or after the fact they put it up, and then they would have to go to the BAR. I just don't know that the education to the existing businesses, newer businesses, it would be able to be done, but to the existing businesses that tomorrow decide to buy a Groucho mark sign for the Grouchos and put up in the corner, does that make sense?
But it's not a reason for us not to do it. Yeah, you're probably right, but it's not a reason if we really.
I didn't say it wasn't a reason. I'm just saying that the process is going to be a little bit murky in the sense that we're probably going to catch them after they put it up and then they come up for approval.
Or we should do some kind of education.
You mean they're not going to self-report?
What's that?
They're not going to self-report?
Yeah.
Again, what we're saying is that we're not saying they're not permitted. We're saying they're regulated.
Right.
And there's a difference.
Right.
I think before that, everybody assumed that it was basically not permitted. Where the last draft of the ordinance went to the council, I think basically said in that regard.
Right.
But what we're saying now, basically, it will be a regulated item by the BAR.
Like anything else that we regulate.
Like everything else we regulate. And we do regulate other signage. We do regulate building color. We regulate a lot of other things regarding.
We got a council member here. What was your take on that? The flavor that the council was talking about. Which direction were the winds of the tea leaves going?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, BAR. Thank you for what you do. From my perspective on council, obviously the self-policing option doesn't work. No one would ever volunteer to do something if they didn't think they had permission to do it or spend money at a business. I'm a small business advocate. I'm an owner of a small business. I do think town needs a guideline. Staff needs a guideline by which to approve or disapprove signage and lighting in or around windows. One struggle I had on council, when you talk about grandfathering, if somebody puts it up and it goes unnoticed for a period of time until a new resident were to move in and complain about it, let's say it's been in a window, and Kurt, I'll use your example of Groucho's. New cobblestone resident moves in, that sign's been up over a year. They see it. It indeed does violate what is on the books. That is not a reason to grandfather something because it went a year without being noticed. If it violates what you would recommend to council, and then council in turn either approves it or denies it. So I think Blythewood is quickly approaching a crossroads of the Board of Architectural Review has to weigh in. I believe you have to tip the scale one way or the other in recommendations to the Planning Commission and to council to say this lighting is acceptable, be it size, color, whether it flashes, whether it doesn't, and these lights are not permissible. These are, these aren't. And the marching orders are more defined. We had 2 small business owners attend the town council meeting. I personally visited both those businesses before the meeting. One of the lights I would deem offensive. The other business lights I would deem they weren't offensive. But by what we were presented at council, it was hard to distinguish between the two.
When you say offensive, can you clarify that? What's offensive mean to you?
Well, that is strictly in the eye of the beholder. So what I would deem personally, even as a council member, offensive, a council member sitting beside me may not deem that as offensive, which is, again, goes back to an ordinance that says if you have LED blinking lights that surround your window frame and they come on at this time and they go off at this time, and it's more of a strobe light or a chasing light or a solid light effect, is that permissible? I think that's what I look for. I think that's where council got in the discussion. Clearly, Mr. Williamson was there. We don't ever want to handicap a small business. Small businesses are the heartbeat of Blythewood. And in one argument, the type of lighting, the argument was this defines our business. Whether you go to Blythewood or Rock Hill or downtown Columbia or KC West Columbia, if you see this kind of lighting, you know what kind of business this is. And I would concur with that. In that one instance, that helps define that type of business. So when they came to Blythewood and introduced that kind of lighting, they were just helping people identify what type of business they were. If we don't want that, then I think that, to answer your question specifically, that level of clarity is what I was looking for on council. We did pass, I think it passed, yes, the size of the signs. That first...
that was just a definition of what is a window sign. The other language was already in there.
It was already in
the
there.
ordinance.
So, but it was more of the lighting.
Now, one other thing, when I say grandfather means were you a business when this was passed? Mm-hmm. And if you were a business before it passed, that's grandfather. But if you became a business after this passed, then you're not grandfather.
Then you're not grandfather.
And I just want to, because it seemed like we're getting that term mixed up there, like if they've been there a year or what have you.
Sure.
The tipping point is when your business was established and the ordinance was passed. Okay. Thanks, Councilman Rich.
In terms of defining, we've had that when I was on the BR before, like with McDonald's. They wanted to do something that defined their business, and we said, no, that doesn't fit here. And we won.
Your example was actually with the Kentucky Fried Chicken, where the initial proposal was to have a giant picture of the Colonel in front of the building. And also, we did not allow that. So we are, working in these, working in a lot of areas along those lines that do regulate signage. And if you do ride down Two Notch Road, I think you can see that there can very quickly get in a situation where you have a lot of signage that I personally feel is not what Blythewood is trying to achieve. And again, I'm going to reiterate what we're saying is we're not saying it's not going to be allowed, but we are saying that there needs to be some regulation regarding how they.
I think so. That's true. All right. Okay. And I will say that that the thing that I'm probably am most proud of as far as the BAR is concerned, that we're not anti-business. We've always tried very hard to work with all the different businesses, and I think we've been very successful. And I'm not aware of any business that really has refused to come to Blythewood because of the regulations that we've required. Maybe with one exception, that being a modular structure that we did not allow. So how do we proceed? I mean, do we?
So as staff, we can draft language and just bring it back to you for discussion again, and kind of work through this. I think that's just the best way. Rather than, there's not enough guidance right now, I think, to draft an amendment. But to just say, okay, these are the different ways. I think we just need to be aware of what's current. The window signs are just kind of unique in that there's not a permit associated with it. So it is going to be a situation where we observe it. But nevertheless, fine. It's just like if someone went out and painted the building, like if Kentucky Fried Chicken just went out tomorrow and reverted back to its old way. Obviously, we would have an issue with that. So that would be a violation of the certificate of appropriateness. So the same sort of thing where we wouldn't allow someone to just blatantly violate it just because they didn't know.
Well, if an applicant came to us today with very bright colors, this board would not approve it for building and so forth to have to do with the building structure. And at least we have it in the past. We've followed those guidelines.
We expect it to continue.
Okay. Any other discussion regarding lighting regulations? Anything else from the board?
That's our job.
Exactly. And nice to have you back, Bob.
Thanks.
It's good to see you, too. Any other comments?
No, Mr. Chair. We're certainly satisfied here.
I don't think anybody has signed up for open citizens' comments.
No, they did not.
Signed up. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second? All right. Those in favor say aye. Ayes have it. All right. Thank you much. It is just what it is kind of